crazy to think that the Rolling Stones have just set out on their 60th anniversary tour. That's 60 years. 1962. If you go back, that was a crazy year for our country and our world. And it just shows you the amount of sustained greatness the Rolling Stones have been able to do over the many decades that they've been together. We've talked about the Rolling Stones before. We're going to revisit them again as their European tour kicks off. You want to come inside and check this one out because there's a lot of really good information. We talk about the importance of sustained greatness, what it takes to be great, and what it takes to continue to do amazing things, loving what you do well into your late 70s and beyond. You're going to love this episode. Let's hit it with the Rolling Stones.
Successful people learn how to make their mind work for them. I'm David Nagel, and this is the Successful Mind Podcast.
Hey everyone, DT, and welcome to another Full Throttle Thursday. I got David here with me, and today we are talking about the Rolling Stones.
The Rolling Stones, man.
We're back. Yeah, we've done a podcast on the Stones before because we know how much you love them.
Yeah.
We've done a recent podcast called Age is Just a Number, which is very apropos because the Rolling Stones are getting up there in age, but they're still continuing to rock out. So we figured this would be a great opportunity for us to have a conversation since the Rolling Stones are starting their 60th anniversary tour June 1st. So by the time this drops, they will have had their first show in Spain, and they're doing a whole European tour. How cool is that?
That's amazing.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Let's dive right
and
in.
Which I imagine will run into the summer of next year to be the 60 tour for the United. I can't imagine them just dropping 60 there. Maybe, I don't know, and ending it. But I don't see that they'll do that unless somebody dies.
They have to come stateside here.
They do.
They have to come to the US.
They were here last summer.
Yeah, and you were at that show.
Yeah.
Like
So normally they go like they'll do the United States, and then they'll do Europe, and then they'll do Central America, that whole thing. And so they switch back and forth. But I have to think that they got to celebrate 60 here in the United States to some degree.
I would think so. They better get over here. It's impressive when you think of the longevity. And like I said before, we've talked about this, but the longevity that they've had. I was having a conversation with our media producers this morning about this, and it's just amazing to think about all the different variations of musical genres that have taken place over the years in the Rolling Stones. To me, and this may be just my untrained ear because, I was a little late to the Rolling Stones game. I was a little bit too young when they came out. Obviously, I wasn't born until the early 70s. I didn't start listening to music until the mid-80s.
Right, and they were on their hiatus in the mid-80s,
exactly.
Right? So they weren't prominent.
For me, it was, hair bands like Motley Crue and Poison, and then it was the grunge scene with Nirvana and Pearl Jam. But if you think about, so the Stones were formed in 62. They had to survive the folk era. They had to survive the disco, the disco era. They've gone through so many.
Do you know that they had one of the largest selling disco hits?
Really?
Yeah.
No kid. I had no idea.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's fast.
Yeah,
so they kind of adapted a little bit.
Look it up. Look up Rolling Stones disco song.
Rolling Stones disco song.
It may be the largest disco.
Miss You special disco version 1978.
Yeah.
Okay. Did the Rolling Stones do a disco song? Yes, they did.
They did.
The Stones created their disco song while Keith was away from the band facing drug possession in Canada.
Yeah.
There you go. I had no idea. So they were actually a part of the disco scene as well. But it just goes to show you that as long as you stay true to their vision, because they really haven't changed much over the years, they've just seemed to sort of play the same type of music, but they elevate their craft each and every time out. I think it's impressive.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the thing is that if you go back to their roots, they were blues guys. They just loved the blues. And that was when the blues and country was turning into rock and roll in the United States. You had Elvis and Chuck Berry and all. Those were their heroes, along with like Muddy Waters and them guys. And their first albums, if you go back to their original albums, they were basically trying to be Muddy Waters and, Howlin' Wolf and all of that. That's what they were totally into. And it took a few years, but they worked into their own, creating their own interpretation of that music. And that's which is the Stones that we love today. And what's interesting is that they've been a band 4 years longer than I've been on this planet.
Exactly.
I mean, that is, well, nobody's ever done this before. No. And I'm actually, if it wasn't that the world was in such chaos, I bet that the news coverage of this would be enormous. I mean, it is an unbelievable accomplishment.
It's unprecedented.
On so many levels.
Yeah. Yeah, it's unprecedented. We've never seen anything like this before, a band being able to do what they're doing. And it's not like they're just going out there and sort of mailing in their shows either.
Oh,
From what you said when you saw them here in Charlotte last summer, they were, Mick was running around like he was in his 20s.
Yeah.
Like he has not changed. His fitness is there. Those guys are still up there wailing and playing and doing what they do best. And then you see other acts who are, well into, their 70s, who you go to their show and they're sitting on a stool and they're playing their songs and it's nostalgic, it's beautiful, but it's not the same high octane energy that the Rolling Stones bring to the table.
Like if you when you're at a live show, I mean it's definitely, if you were to pull a show from their 1972 tour and you look at them today, it's obvious Mick has slowed down. But the fact that he's moving for the entire show and in a dancing rhythm, not just standing there at a microphone, is phenomenal. And in 2019, he had a heart valve replaced.
Yeah.
Right?
Crazy.
If we remember that,
Yeah.
right? The tour got put on hold until he had the heart valve done, and then he had to get back in shape and then went right back out on the road.
Yeah.
Right after that.
It's so amazing. Speaking of which, and I've never been to a Rolling Stones concert before, what kind of crowd do you have there? Do you have like the old guys and the old ladies who are wearing like the shirts from 1972 World Tour? Do you have that kind
it's a
of
mix.
crowd?
It's a mix. There's everything from kids to people that are their age at those concerts.
Okay.
And they pack those arenas.
Yeah.
40, 50, 60, 70,000 people. What's the stadium in Denver?
Oh, the football stadium, the Mile High Stadium.
Yeah, Mile High Stadium. A few years back, I went to see them there.
Oh, you saw them there.
And they were completely sold out. It was fascinating that many people were flying in from around the world to see them there in Denver. Really? Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I bet it just sounded amazing. And that's such a beautiful location. You got the mountains on one side, you got the prairie on the other. And if you've never seen a concert in a like outdoor stadium, whether it be a football stadium or a baseball stadium. I remember when we saw the Eagles for the first time for me up in Philadelphia at their baseball park.
Was so good.
And just being able to see all those thousands and thousands of people stuffed into an area and just hearing the way the sound just echoed around and not just from the band, but also from the people singing along and the cell phone flashlights going in the distance. I think it's just such and then you got the sun going down behind the stage because you're outdoors.
Yeah.
I mean, if you get a chance, definitely go see a large stadium type concert in your lifetime if you haven't already. I mean, it's so crazy. But one of the things that I really wanted to talk about today was just to kind of get a sense of, what the Rolling Stones, sort of, and we've discussed this before, what it means to you, but, from a mindset perspective here, and I'm going to kind of twist it to the successful mind here for a moment. These guys have been together for 60 years. And I know they've lost some of their members along the way, and they recently lost another member in 2021.
One of the originals.
Charlie
Watts.
Which has always got to be difficult. But how do people stick together for that long and not disband or break up or just end up shitting and destroying all over the relationship? Because you hear about this a lot of time, especially in rock and roll. You've got such strong egos. There's got to be something holding them together. And you've read all of their biographies and you've studied them all. What is it that helps them stay together?
I think it's the maturity over the years, right? So I think it is them looking at who they are, what they mean to the world, what they mean to culture. They all have agreed, especially Mick and Keith, because they're the two. That's where the magic happens between those two guys, right? And then they've had their differences over the years, and some of it was pretty public. The differences and their own individual issues, right? Sure. So, from what I've read, and which seems to make total sense to me, is that each one of them in their own way, including Ronnie, because Ronnie didn't show up into the band until 1975, have had experience with other bands. Keith, during time off, Keith plays with the Winos, and they do some other stuff. Mick will go do things with other people. But one of the things that they know is that their massive success, their magic is when they're together. There's something that happens there that they don't experience anyplace else. So it probably, or not probably, it did kind of start out as a family environment, right? Mick and Keith grew up together. They've known each other since they were in their single digits.
That's amazing.
You know, and then they get together in their teenage years, and it's kind of like a brother type situation. But as they mature, the brother thing kind of goes away, and it becomes more of a partner. I think it's a relationship of mutual respect versus the emotional turmoil of a family. You know, I think they went through all of that, and they came out on the other side, and they're like, "What do we want to do with this? You know, this could go up in a ball of flames, or we could do the thing that we love and do it in the most amazing way that nobody else can do together." And the fact that they were all able to do that, they all got in harmony with the core tenet of they loved what they did, right? We all know it's not about money. These guys are unbelievably wealthy. And it always kills me when somebody says, "Why are they still doing it? They don't need the money." They're not working at something that they don't like. They absolutely love what they do. And I heard Keith talk about this a couple of years ago because every year when they go on tour, this conversation comes up. Why are you still doing it? Blah, blah, blah. And he said that, you know, they've been on the road this was a few years ago. They've been on the road for 50 years. And he goes, when I'm at home, I start to get stir crazy. He's like, we go home, we take our break that we have to take. We do our family things. And then it's like one of us calls the other, goes, it's time to get back on the road. You know, it's who they are at this point. It's not something that they just do. Being musicians is who they are. And their company is the Stones. That's, you know, so that's what it is.
Yeah,
It's hard to get across. You know, when people work jobs and they only go to work because of the money and they do something that they don't really love to do, it's hard for somebody like that to really understand when somebody loves the work that they do. And as long as they can do it, why would they stop? Why would they stop?
Yeah, it would make no sense for them to stop. I mean, and also if they stopped, they would probably stop for good, meaning they probably wouldn't be around much longer because you've seen this happen before.
Right.
Like people, when they flame out, when their passion's gone, they have nothing else to look forward to. They just kind of give up and say, I've had a good life and I'm done.
They do. And it's obvious that millions and millions of people around the world enjoy them to no end. You know, when Cuba opened up a few years back and they were the first rock and roll band to go play Cuba, they had over 1 million people at that concert.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Right? They had a couple million when they played Brazil. I mean, Keith talked about that the crowd went so far back that they could not see the end of where the crowd was. And they had to literally figure out how to time the music with the vocals depending on where Mick was versus where the band was, and they're playing things, they're ahead of where the people in the back are actually hearing them. Like it's a wild problem to have.
Yeah, sure.
But I try to go every year that they come to the States, and every year they're sold out instantly. Right. I mean, the tickets go so damn fast.
Yeah, they still draw. I mean, huge draw. Yeah, and I love that you brought up Cuba. They also played in China as well, and then they also were the first band to play in post-communist Russia.
There you go.
So when you want to open up a new country, you know, you bring in the Stones. They just bring the Stones in. It's just fascinating. One of the things that I think is so interesting about the Stones is, you know, they were formed in 1962, and they basically were formed the same time as the Beatles started their rise, right? So in all the research that you've done, because the Beatles, their first song, Love Me Do, came out in 1962. And that was the first single that the Beatles ever released, which was the year that the Stones were formed. In your research or watching or listening or reading, did they talk about the chip that they had on their shoulder? Is there a chip? Was that something that was created by the media? No, they were actually friends. They were actually very close friends. I always wondered about that. What happened was that they had to create a persona. They couldn't be the next Beatles.
So they became the antithesis to the Beatles, right? So you had the Beatles was the family-friendly band, and the Stones was you wouldn't let your daughter sleep with her or marry a Rolling Stone, right?
Grimier.
They were ugly and grimy, and they didn't wear the suits with the ties that the Beatles did. They had the edge, and then they Keith says, my fans created my persona. And he said, and it's my job to live up to it, right? So, but that's really what it is. They became the antithesis. But if you read Keith Richards' book, they talk about how they would, like Keith and John Lennon would talk to each other, and they would talk about, okay, when is your single going out? And then we'll wait and put our single out next. Who's done in the studio first? They were very good friends. And Keith and John were very close.
Yeah, sure. It's more of a collaborative. I think that's the beauty of, like creatives being around other creatives. And you speak in your teachings often about there really is no competition. I mean, really, if you think about there's plenty to go around for everybody, but the media tends to want to hold on to that. And I think it's cool that behind the scenes, these guys were actually quite friendly. And they said, well, we're dropping this single. Give us a little bit of time. We'll drop this one. So we're not competing against one another there. There's enough pie to go around.
They were creating from what turned them on, not to like beat their latest song, right? They never did that. They never were like, okay, we had this top 10 hit. We got to put out another top 10 hit. The record companies would want that, but they would always go do the thing that they wanted to do. They played what they wanted to play, not what anybody else thought that they should play. Yeah. It was not about trying to create chart toppers. And that band has probably, I mean, it's arguable that they have probably more songs that they have created that are the backdrop of people's lives growing up from the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and even to now than any other band. I mean, well, nobody's done it this long. Right. So, I mean, and they keep creating new music on top of it. It's not top 10 stuff, but I mean, their catalog is enormous.
Yeah, sure. And if you start watching, if you watch enough television, watch enough movies, it seems like you can't scroll through a show without hearing some sort of a Rolling Stone song playing in the background or an end credit scene or something along those lines. I was just watching an old episode of Entourage the other day, and one of them showed up, and I just love when they play those old deep cuts from the, I shouldn't call them deep cuts, they were hits back in the day. One thing that's fascinating about them forming in 1962 and likening it to what's going on in 2022 is it was a very interesting year for our country. I'm just going to rattle off a few little things I found here. Listen to this. These all took place the same year the Rolling Stones were formed in 1962. So John Glenn became the first American to orbit the Earth. So he was the first in 1962. The world mourns the death of actress Marilyn Monroe, who was found dead in her home of what was believed to be an overdose of sleeping pills. Nelson Mandela was arrested and later given a life sentence, of which he served 27 years in prison until he was released in 1990. That's a pivotal sort of time in that whole movement with Nelson Mandela. The very first James Bond film was released in 1962. Is that right? Sean Connery, Dr. No. Yeah, very first. There's 25 of them now, but that was the very first. The Cuban Missile Crisis. I'm sure people have heard of that. That took place in 1962. I already mentioned the Beatles' Love Me Do. Their first single was released. There was also some tumultuous times around race in our country. There was some rioting that took place in the University of Mississippi following a black student named James Meredith was attempting to enroll there. 1962. The Space Needle in Seattle, Washington is completed in 1962.
We've been up there a few times.
We've been up there a few times. Pretty cool there. An oral polio vaccine is introduced and given to millions of children to fight the disease. Yeah. Isn't that interesting as well? So that sort of mirrors what happened with the whole COVID outbreak that happened.
In other words, there was a lot going on in 62.
A lot going on. I didn't even mention that Spider-Man made his first appearance in a comic book. I didn't mention that the very first Walmart opened, the very first Kmart opened, the very first Motel 6 opened, and we were a mere 4 years away from the momentous birth of one David Nagel, who would grow up to be a mega Stones fan.
Yeah, mega Stones fan. Isn't that crazy?
1962 was insane.
Yeah.
Like when you think about it, and then because people will say, well, it's so different nowadays. Everything's so crazy. You go back in the day, there was just as much crazy stuff. It's never been not crazy.
Right. It's never
so
been
when you
crazy.
Go through that list, it really is shocking. And the Stones continue to make music.
Well, I mean, just breaking down the 60s and the 70s, I mean, it's just one crazy thing after another. But, it's really interesting, and we did. You're right. We saw this in the Eagles too. But you go to these concerts and you look at the fans. You can see the adoration, like the memories, right? It's taking people back to very poignant times in their life that's associated with that music, and I think that that's very important. It may not be important 10 years, 20 years from now, but the people that grew up during that time. Sure. That music is still very important to those people. It's important to me. I love listening, and I'm a lover of all kinds of music, right? It's not just like the Stones, but I think it's just absolutely fascinating that they can continue to do something in a way where it's not looked at or mocked, but it is deeply appreciated and loved by people all over the world. Everywhere they go, it's just amazing the amount of people that actually come out to see them. So it tells you that there's a relevance there that most people don't think of. Because the Stones are not, in the 70s and stuff, with one of them's always getting busted for drugs or, whatever, they were headline news constantly. Well, you don't even hear about them now unless they're on tour and somebody says something to you. But then you go to the show and you see, holy shit, look at how many friggin' people are here. And the thing is they probably could sell 3-4 nights out.
Sure.
They don't do that anymore, but it's obvious that they could.
Well, and I love that you bring up, when you go to those shows and you look around and you see what it means to the people that are in that audience. You know that feeling you get when the hair on the back of your neck stands up, when you hear a song. Music has this amazing ability to just transport you to a place, unlike any place or any other thing can really do that. Smells can do that and sounds can do that, but there's something about the music. You actually know where you were the first time you heard it, or who you were with, or what you were doing, and it just instantly brings you back. Like, we are time travelers when you think about it, and most of that time travel happens around the music that is being played. Over the course of the weekend, we this is a throwback here, we had a chance to get away for a weekend, and we were camping up in the North Georgia mountains, and we happened to stop by a drive-in movie theater. So that's first and foremost. They're still out there, people. Find your local drive-in movie theater.
Was this a reopened one?
This was I think it's been around for a very long time, and they were showing the new Top Gun movie that came out in 86. So the new Top Gun 2 came out, and they were showing a first-run movie. It just dropped a few days before, and they have it on the big screen here at this drive-in movie theater. So we get there, and they're playing what I eventually, because whenever I go to a place and I hear like really good music, I'll go up and ask the person, like, hey, what playlist are you using? What platform are you using? Is this Pandora? Is this Spotify? Is this Apple Music? Whatever it might be. And he told me it was Top Gun Radio on Pandora. So I immediately went and started listening to that, because every single song was taking me back to those mid to late 80s,
Is that right?
early 90s. It was a lot of...
Was the movie good?
The movie was outstanding. Here's the thing. It's probably going to get shredded by some of the younger audience, because they don't make movies like that anymore. It's very much a nod to the original. That took place in 1986. That was 36 years ago, but it very much did a lot of those subtle little nods that if you remember the first one, you're going to see a lot of that in the second one. But the fact that Tom Cruise, another sustained greatness individual, is still doing his own stunts. And for me, the fascinating part about that film is the way they shot the fighter pilot scenes, because those are real fighter pilots. And this was really cool. One of the Blue Angels who flew Tom Cruise in these sort of missions was at the drive-in movie theater. He had about 30 of his family. They all had on Top Gun hats, and they introduced him at the beginning of this drive-in movie theater. And he was like the real life Blue Angel who did some flying with Tom Cruise. But it was really super cool. But all that to say, it brings you to a place like the hair on my arms is standing up thinking about that. Yeah, the goosies come out when you see people in their element. And that's probably why I got shushed by that gentleman at the Eagles concert in Philadelphia. I think because I didn't grow up with the Eagles. I heard them, but I wasn't like rabid, and they were playing an older song that I wasn't really into or whatever, and I was having a conversation with Steph, and that guy turned around and told me to basically shut my mouth. Because
pissed him off.
I pissed him off because, and I thought my original reaction was, dude, chill out. But then I was like, you know what, maybe that was a little bit rude. It'd be like me starting to talk during the national anthem, or something like that.
People are going there to hear it, and if they can't, well, if you remember, we went to the Seeger concert, that guy that was screaming right behind us, like, it was so disruptive to the show because he was so loud that you couldn't enjoy what you were there to listen to.
Yeah.
I think people get carried away.
It's so
like
true.
that.
So I probably should have watched myself in that regard. But yeah, I mean, it's cool to look at and see the people and how they're enjoying it. And the Stones, again, like I said, sustained greatness. I mean, how are they able to do it this many years in and just continue to keep going? I guess you mentioned it earlier. It's just all about the passion and the brotherhood, and they're better off on the road than they
preparation. I mean, I just read an article Saturday or Sunday, and a new interview with Mick, and he's talking about his workout routine that he's doing 6-7 days a week in order to be able to perform. And this year is like the first year that he actually admitted that it's getting a little bit difficult to do that. A couple of years ago, he was in an interview and they asked him, how's your body holding out? Are you finding that it's difficult to get up and walk and 10 things that a lot of older people experience? And he's like, I haven't experienced that yet. But apparently this year, he's starting to experience it. And his attitude is, it has to be done. It just has to be done. They have an unbelievable work ethic when it comes to the dedication of what they do. So you have the principle that they love what they do, and they're also committed to putting on a good show. It's not like they're just going to fuck off and then, at some point they're going to do a show and you're kind of like, they're really not prepared and they're rusty or whatever. They really work at putting out an amazing show. I mean, you get your money's worth when you go to a show, one of their shows.
Yeah, I can see them not quitting anytime soon. I could see them continuing to move forward. And I feel like if their performances start to drop in their mind, they'll walk away. I mean, they want to go out as close to on top as possible. It reminds me of the greats like, Michael Jordan, who came back after retiring for the second time and he played with the Washington Wizards. He still performed at a very high level, but he knew that he was probably starting to be done. I want to go out. You don't want to see those old guys be pushed out and just quit that way.
I mean, the way Keith said, they said, well, he can't quit till he croaks. So I think what you're going to see here is either one of the two, Mick or Keith, either becomes too old, like they become they can't function. They can't actually do it anymore, or one of them dies, and that'll be the end, probably.
Yeah, absolutely. And that'll be a very sad day. We already felt that.
And the thing is, we never know when that's coming. Right. So if you want to go see him, you better go while you can. I mean, I even considered going to Europe this year, but my schedule was just too packed to do it. So I'm kind of hoping that the tour carries over.
Oh man, I would have loved. I was looking at their lineup, and they are playing a show in the next week in Liverpool at Anfield, where the Liverpool Football Club plays, which was just my team, and it would be so cool to see, because Liverpool, of course, is the birthplace of the Beatles, and being there in that space, in that hallowed ground, just hearing them play, that would be definitely worth the trip. So for the people who have lasted this long, who may not be Stones fans, and they're like, okay, what can I learn from the Rolling Stones? I think that I'd like to start winding down this episode by, what can a person who maybe has no interest in the Rolling Stones, what can you learn from what these guys have been doing for the last 60 years?
So I think there's some very important points. One, do what you love, because it's not work. It is. I mean, life has its hardships as it is, but when you get up and do what you love every day, it makes everything else easier in life, right? Because there's nothing worse than getting up in the morning and going, holy shit, I can't believe I have to do this again. This really sucks. Like, to get up with that kind of an attitude is horrible. The other thing is, I think that they've done something tremendous for people who are getting older, when they're in the last phase of their life, and they're proving that they can still do the thing society wants to put. I mean, I think every generation, it gets a little bit older when we're putting people on a shelf. It used to be in your 50s, they would put you on the shelf. You were done in your 50s, and then it was the 60s. And now it's 70s, and now we have people going into their 80s. Like we talked about the runner a few weeks back, right? So I think that it's important. Humanity sees this, and it changes the paradigm in our mind of what's possible. So I think that there'll be a lot of people that look at it that are getting up in age and going, something, if these guys can keep going, doing the thing that they love, so can I. Because a lot of it is the mindset around, because you're getting older, you should. And they're like, no, we're going to do what we want to do. There is no should. If we can still do it, why not do it? Why not do it?
Why not? Yeah, there's no reason to stop.
No
Absolutely.
reason.
All right, last question here. I'm going to put you on the spot.
One more thing.
Okay.
One more thing with that.
Okay.
I learned something, and you've heard me talk about this, especially with Keith, but Mick is the same way. And I can't really speak for Charlie or for Ronnie, but one of the things that I think is absolutely amazing for the longevity of those two guys is they completely accept themselves. They love who they are as human beings, regardless. And they've lived their life on their own. These are the way that they wanted to. The drugs, the sex, the scandals, all of that. Not one of them would change anything. They absolutely loved those times of their lives, and I think that a person. They have the ability to go longer and farther when they accept themselves, because they don't think that their body becomes an excuse for them to stop, right? I think the body becomes an excuse to stop when a person really wants to stop. But it's rare that you see people accept themselves the way that those two guys did, especially Keith.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Okay, so putting you on the spot here. This is probably unfair. It's like asking you who your favorite of your children are. You can't answer the question, but if you were to pick your top 3 Rolling Stone songs in any particular order, is there any songs that jump out at you that say, those are the 3 that if I had to listen to those 3 songs for the rest of my life, those are the ones that I would do?
My top 3, eh? Well, first let me ask you this. Do you have one?
Yeah, so I really enjoy, I think it's called Sympathy for the Devil.
Yep, Sympathy for the Devil.
Song. I love that song. I love Paint It Black. I love that sort of, bluesy, sort of edgy, sort of dark and mysterious song. And I think the other one would probably be maybe Gimme Shelter.
Me too. Yeah, definitely. What is the actual? Let's hang on a second here.
And I love Jumpin' Jack Flash, but they made a movie called Jumpin' Jack Flash, and I love that song, and I had no idea that it was a Rolling Stone song until I watched it back.
I love all 3 of those.
Yeah, totally.
And why is this? Hang on a second. Keep this is.
Ooh, what's that one?
Hell, hang on.
Deep Cuts.
Yeah, we don't want to do we don't want to have an issue.
That's exactly right. Played exactly 9 seconds of that song. That's great.
So, yeah, I would say you can't always get what you want. I love that. I mean, it just goes on and on. I was looking at, because I have a Stones playlist, but I'm having a little bit of trouble with, let's see here. I love Street Fighting Man, Get Off of My Cloud, Jumpin' Jack Flash,
yes.
Start Me Up. I mean, they start the show with that.
That one
with
gets
that
you
song.
revved up. I bet the crowd goes bananas.
Satisfaction.
Yes.
I love Satisfaction. I love Miss You. Let's see here. Gimme Shelter is right up there. Midnight Rambler.
Yep.
I love Monkey Man. You can't always get what you want. I could just keep going on and on.
Brown Sugar.
I don't have a top. The Brown.
Angie.
Yeah, and there's a lot of So do you know that they pulled that from the set list a couple years ago?
I did hear that.
They did
yeah.
because of all the. It's a very sensitive topic right now, right? So they pulled it from the set list, but it is an amazing song.
Yeah, it is.
It is such an amazing song.
Yeah, it is.
So
cool. Well, that's good. I mean, yeah, like I said, it's difficult for you to pick any one song. So I'm glad you just were able to share with us. And, congrats to the Stones for starting their 60th anniversary tour. They're out on the road right now. They're going to be predominantly, actually all throughout Europe. They're not in the States yet, but hopefully, God willing, they'll be here in 2023 and we'll be able to take advantage of that and maybe see them.
And as far as albums go, I'm a big Exile on Main Street fan. It's such an amazing album.
So there you go.
Such an amazing album.
You should start listening to that right now.
Yeah.
That's good. I like it. Well, this has been so fun. Love the hat. Didn't even call out the hat. For those on YouTube, you got to check out this hat. I mean, this Rolling Stones guy right here.
I had to bring my geach. I had to bring my stuff.
Heck yeah. You got the swagged boot. This has been really fun. Thanks, David.
Yep.
All right, everybody. Well, if you're a Rolling Stones fan or not, I hope you got a lot of good intel out of that one. We were all over the map, and that's kind of the fun part about Full Throttle Thursdays. Do us a favor, leave us a comment down below. Let us know what your favorite Rolling Stones song is, or maybe if you're not a big Stones fan, let us know what type of music you like to listen to, and maybe pop us a recommendation down below on what we should be listening to back when you were growing up. We've got people who listen to this podcast who are in their teens all the way up into their 80s and 90s. So let us know what you're listening to, and we'll start building out our own playlists on this end. Once again, thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to smash that like button down below, ring that bell so you don't miss any of this amazing content, and we'll see you on the next Successful Mind podcast. Go jam out to some tunes.
Thanks for listening to the Successful Mind podcast. And if you like what you heard and you want to know more, go to davidnagel.com/free stuff.